What's up, everyone? Thomas Wortman here, and we are talking with Kevin Hawkins, who is a broker, team leader at Alder Point Real Estate. And I thought it would be interesting to have Kevin on to talk about something other than real estate, but to talk about hunting. Kevin, you recently just got back from a elk hunting trip in New Mexico, right?
Yeah. What's up, man? Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just got back. I just pulled into town Monday night. So that was a really neat experience. It was a long drive. So
And this is something hunting. It's something that, especially elk hunting, right? Would you say you're more passionate about elk hunting?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I love most types of Western big game hunting. But elk hunting is especially what gets me excited. So
Yeah. So, and the reason I want to talk about this is because uh, Del Norte County, as a rural community, as a community that's connected very much with nature and being surrounded by forest, hunting is a big part of the culture here. And so just kind of talk a little bit, you can, about how you kind of got more serious about hunting and especially big game hunting and what it does for you and your family and why you enjoy it so much.
sure. Well, I'll go back to my childhood. So I started hunting deer when I was a kid. I got my hunting license when I was as soon as I could. I think I was probably 12 years old. And I never really had any success, but we weren't, my family wasn't very serious about it. It was kind of one of those things that I would go out with my aunt and uncle and my cousins, typically once a year. And it pretty much came down to what I felt like was walking around the woods in the hot summer weather and shooting nothing. And that was
Sure.
kind of my understanding of hunting for
Sure.
most of my
Now, were
childhood.
you guys doing a lot of
Wait,
road hunting back then, or were you just
no,
in the woods?
no, my family has never been road hunters, which is
Okay.
really normal around here. And we can kind of go into
It's
what
really the
that
preferred
is.
method. It's the preferred method for if you're hunting in Del Norte.
Yeah, we could jump into that. But the type of hunting that we did was we would basically go and grid a mountainside, hillside, or go just do a lot of walking, which was close to what hunting actually looks like. But at the end of the day, when you only go do it once or twice a season and expect results, for me as a teenager or as a young person, it seemed like we were putting in all this time and effort, but we never killed anything. So I got kind of discouraged on it as a young person. And then fast forward, I had all sorts of hobbies after that. I didn't really ever get into hunting as a kid. I did a lot of bird hunting, which I loved. Duck hunting and goose hunting was more of something that I got excited about because there was results and we had animals. We'd come home with animals every weekend.
And would you do that
But
locally?
yeah, absolutely. So we do
Now,
lots of duck hunting
what
and
does
goose
that
hunting.
look like? I've never been. I've heard that Lake Earl is a great place, but I've never done it.
Yeah, so Lake Earl's cool, and the duck hunting compared to like other areas in the country is not super great, but you can have a blast all the time. It's a great thing to do with kids, and I would still do it. The only reason why I don't now is because I don't particularly enjoy eating duck here locally as much as I wish I did. So I
Sure,
just am very passionate about if I'm going to shoot something, I want to make sure and eat it and not waste that life. So that's
sure.
kind of where I'm at. But I've got kids now, and very likely we'll get back into some sort of waterfowl hunting because it just is a wonderful thing to do. It's really fun, and you get a lot of trigger time, you get a lot of time behind the gun, and it really helps young kids with their point and shoot sort of skills. So I really
Cool.
enjoyed that. But then, anyways, fast forward through my
Yeah.
young adult life, college. I didn't hunt, and then I got back into Crescent City after college, got into real estate, and got married and started having kids. And I think after my first child, I somehow started watching long range hunting videos on YouTube. And that really sparked my interest back into the hunting world because it kind of, the idea of what it was something that I never had connected with. It really had this really neat idea of the long range aspect. So, uh, for those of you that understand what long range hunting would be, it would be having a rifle that can shoot extra long distances, and there's a lot of technology and systems that go into play to make
Cool.
sense of it. And it was just a really neat idea. And
Yeah.
then so starting to kind of getting interested in it, I ended up booking my first deer hunt. I started with deer. I didn't want to jump directly into elk, even though I knew that was what I wanted to, what got me excited. It just seemed like a larger mountain to climb, and I was more familiar with deer as a animal to hunt. So I started deer hunting and just did my first real serious year. I did a really gnarly hunt in Idaho, and it was pure suffering. We were hiking 10 miles a day, which isn't totally crazy, but in this particular hunt we were doing 3,000 feet of elevation in the first hour and a half every day.
How many days was it?
That was a week-long hunt. That was
Mm.
I think 9 days total, so a day of driving on both sides. So,
And
but
was it a successful hunt?
no, it wasn't. It wasn't.
Huh.
In fact, I still have nightmares about it. I mean, like it was just like, but it's like Joe Rogan talks about this type of
Yeah,
fun. There's like the one type, the fun that you get on a roller coaster. That's type one, and then type two is kind of like that miserable fun, which isn't
yeah,
fun at all. But
yeah.
you think back on that hunt, or
Fondly.
you think back on that
Yeah,
experience, and you think, dang, that was so intense. But
yeah,
something about it makes me want to do it again.
yeah,
And so that experience of just straight suffering in the mountains for the first time as a young adult was like, I've got to get back and do this some more. So that's kind of what got me off on it.
cool.
Yeah.
And then from there, how was the transition into big game then?
So, you know, ever since that year, so we wrapped up that particular hunt, and that was like 6 years ago, I think. I'd have to go back and look, but um, you kind of start thinking, especially when you come out. And I haven't been, I have been anything but a lucky hunter. I'm blessed in so many ways in my life, but everything that I've killed in my hunting world has not been extremely impressive, but it has been hard fought and hard earned. And so that coming home empty handed again, that was one hunt. That was one hunt in one season. And for me, going into that, you have high expectations and you come out having a dose of reality. And so since then, I've just basically started planning hunts and in the off season doing lots of shooting, lots of archery shooting in my yard, and basically it's one of these really fun things for me that I can focus energy on. I can be very goal oriented with
Mhm.
throughout the year. But the cool thing with hunting is that, I mean, you could make a hunting season. Some people will hunt year round. I really don't. I hunt in the fall. I hunt starting in September, and I'm typically done by middle of November. And I don't hunt as much in October. It's more September and November that I'm hunting. And so I get to focus for 8, 9 months out of the year on physical conditioning, on preparing myself, whether that be shooting the rifle, whether that be shooting the bow, things that require a significant amount of reps. That's something I get to focus on. So for me, one of the beautiful things about hunting is that it doesn't take too much time out of my life, but it does allow me to have a focus outside of work, family, spiritual life that helps keeps me on track, keeps me on goal for all the other things. Because in order for me to hunt, I have to be successful at work. I have to be able to pay the bills. I have to be able to take time off. I have to be able to spend enough time with my family to where it makes sense for me to leave them, my sweet wife, with all of our children without me. So it does actually, what I find is it makes me prioritize everything else in my life.
Mhm.
And it's not one of these things where I do it every day. So it doesn't take time away from the family all the time. It's really a small portion of the year. So
Mhm.
that's one of the many things that I love about it. And I've just continued to do this. So now, 6 years later, I'm going on typically two elk hunts a year. So I'm gone typically 20 days a year hunting at this point.
That's great. And so I love how because I have these things too in my life where it's like this is the apex, it's like the apex habit, where it's like if you are drinking, at least for me, it's like water. If I make sure that I'm on top of drinking enough water during the day, then it kind of organizes the rest of my day. It's just something very simple that holds me accountable to taking care of the rest of the things that I need to take care of. And so for like you having this discipline of thinking about hunting, preparing for hunting, it helps sort out the rest of your year and your calendar that's kind of revolving around these hunting events. It's a cool way to structure it. What else about hunting in that discipline in terms of discipline, but also in terms of mentality and even spirituality. Uh, what is it about hunting that really is satisfying to you, or what is the thing that keeps driving you to want to organize your year around hunts?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think about that a lot. Um, Gosh, I think that on one aspect of it, it's doing hard things that you suck at
Yeah.
seem to continually have like this certain draw. It's like, why can't it's kind of like golf. It's like, dude, I know that this ball, it only has to go straight and in one direction. And for some reason, I can hit the ball in every other direction of the direction
And
it
it's
wants to
not
go.
moving. It's just
And it's not even
stationary, the
moving, it's
golf
just sitting
ball. It
right
doesn't
there.
move.
Yeah, no, and so that's kind of like how hunting is. It's like there's something about it, and I think that it's just how hard it is. I think that it's that these animals are professionals at surviving, and we as humans are so out of touch with being killers that it's just like this really intriguing process. And so I definitely don't like just like take I don't like love the killing aspect of it, but to me, the killing is good for the soul. And we live in such a soft world, especially as men, that taking life is it's a hard thing even when you're used to it. And at this point, I grew up taking, just like with waterfowl, you kill a ton of animals in waterfowl, and
Mhm,
that's another one of the reasons why I love that sort of hunting, because
mhm,
I think it's really good for your soul.
mhm.
But to take life, to be able to respect life and take it, understand where you're getting your food from, to me feeds the soul. I feel like that's truly what God intended for us, and I love getting back to those sorts of things, especially as a father. I love the idea of being able to have hobbies, right? And we'll call this a hobby that I can continue to do, that I can train my kids and do, and that doesn't just give us an opportunity to recreate together, but I do truly feel like doing something that makes them better as people, as young men, is important. So if I'm gonna spend my time, energy, money doing something, I want that thing to be personally and spiritually edifying. And so I think that hunting checks those boxes for me. I don't think it's the only thing that checks those boxes, but for me, it's a simple thing that I like doing. And so I love the idea of getting out in nature, because ultimately, 99% of hunting is just hiking around with a weapon. I mean, that's
Yeah,
really what it is. You're not,
yeah,
most of
and
the time, you're not.
that's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a beautiful thing. You get to see
yeah,
beautiful country. I mean, just for an example of like every year for the last 6 years, I've seen country that I've never seen before. Not that I couldn't see, but I likely wouldn't see. It's not likely that I would spend time in the Idaho mountains, or in the Montana mountains, or in the New Mexico mountains, spending time hiking and just really getting to absorb in just this beautiful scenery. I mean, like, of course I could, but the drive to go do something like that, to go hike around for no reason, for me just isn't there. Some people have that drive. I don't. I really need a purpose, and for me, the hunting gets me there. And if I come home with an animal, that is obviously what I want, and that's amazing. If I don't, at least I saw some really beautiful country, and I put some sweat equity in and really enjoyed myself while I was
yeah,
there.
that's great.
I
So
Yeah, I mean, I've yet to go to a place that wasn't beautiful.
yeah, yeah, and well, speaking of that, what's the next trip?
Well, I just got back from New Mexico,
Mhm,
and that was an amazing experience. That was a 23-hour drive one way. And that was a blast. I mean, New Mexico is amazing. I recently was in Arizona a couple months ago, spending some time in Sedona, and then obviously in the Grand Canyon. And I love that type of country, that red dirt, crazy rock formation. And New Mexico is very similar. It's not as quite as grandiose as Arizona is in the area that I was in, but just totally different from what we're used to here in the Pacific Northwest. And so I'd love to go back to New Mexico. But the way that I determine where I hunt is what tags I draw. I have an application process that basically puts me in to a mixing pot of opportunities all over the West. So I put in for Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, New Mexico, Oregon, California, and then I will likely be in Alaska next year on a moose hunt at some point, probably in September.
Awesome.
And yeah, and so it just depends. So like this year, for example, I didn't draw any tags except for an Oregon. I didn't even draw it. I just went over and bought an Oregon over-the-counter elk tag. I had California tags, which are worthless, and I just buy them to be a contributing member of society here. And I had an Alaska hunt for moose that got canceled, and so that's when once that hunt canceled in Alaska, I wanted to essentially fill my later part of the season up, and so I started looking for another hunt, and I was able to buy a tag in New Mexico, and so that
Right.
was really cool. And so
Oh,
there's always opportunities. If you want to hunt elk or deer every year, you can. There's lots of people out there that say that it's not possible, but if it's important to you enough, there's plenty of ways to make it happen.
now, and this is also overlapping into a lifestyle change that you've made, where you are have really been changing your diet and focusing more on eating more meat, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, it's
Do
not,
you feel
yeah.
comfortable talking about that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we eat a lot of meat regardless. I have a family of
Yeah.
6 and all boys and one beautiful woman at home. And so we eat 2 elk a year if we have it. And or like an elk and a beef or something like that. I mean,
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I bought a half a beef like 3 months ago and it's practically gone. So
Wow.
so yeah, I mean, we go through it, and I'm on like what's a diet that is kind of termed as animal based,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a joke off of plant based eating. But basically, it's just meat, a meat based diet with some fruit and some raw dairy. And anyway, so but like 70% of my diet is meat and fat, so I eat a lot of meat, and that plugs in very well with obviously one of the reasons why it's also important for me to hunt is because it's not economic to hunt. I mean, like any way you slice it, unless you're fortunate enough to live in an area where you can just go out on the weekend and just go kill elk, which isn't really the case for us. We can kill one elk in Oregon like that.
Yeah.
Um, but for me to get a second elk, it really takes a trip basically. And so it doesn't financially pencil, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to because I'm okay with taking the financial hit to source that meat in the
Yeah.
way that is special to me. It truly is special. So yeah, so a part of my diet obviously is I eat a lot of meat, and I have even before this sort of lifestyle change for me that I did about 6 months ago. But it especially makes sense now because I eat a lot of meat. I eat like 3 pounds of meat a day just to myself if I
Yeah.
can.
And
If I can
you've been
stuff it down.
extremely diligent with that as well. I mean, we went on a trip to Las Vegas together for a real estate conference, stayed at a hotel, and I was very impressed with your diligence to your diet. I mean, if any place where you're going to be like, you know what, I think I can take a weekend off, it would have been there, and you didn't.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It's
Yeah.
hard, and for me, I don't know how other people work, but for me, if I allow myself to cheat in that way, it's just me admitting defeat. And
Mm.
it's really just the beginning of the end before I stop doing it completely. And so that's
No,
probably
I
just
think that's
me.
true of
But
everyone. Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
true of
so
everyone. Yeah.
it's like, hey, you know what? If I can't stay disciplined now because really discipline is only discipline when faced with an opportunity to veer from what you want, right? Like, so discipline when it's easy and when it makes sense and when all the pieces come together, it's not really discipline. What's discipline is when something like, I don't know, like something that you're not supposed to eat that is really not good for you is sitting in
Yeah.
front of you and you're like, you know what? I'm going to give myself the opportunity to just, get a buy on this one. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's when discipline really, when
Yeah.
rubber really meets the road.
Yeah,
And so it's
make a
hard.
little compromise deal with yourself just in your brain. Oh no, I'm gonna
Yeah,
justify this real quick. Yeah,
and you know what? There's nothing wrong with doing that. And I would be lying if I said I hadn't done it, but I
yeah,
really try not to. I really try not to. Although when I was in New Mexico, it's so funny. It was actually what we would call a guided hunt. So I actually had we stayed at a house with a professional hunter essentially, and they basically, because we didn't know the area, we paid somebody to basically guide us through the area that we were hunting. And that's a really great way to level yourself up on hunting skills as a new hunter, because you're hanging out with somebody who literally does it every day for their job. And so that's like just getting to spend time with somebody who knows a lot more than you and kind of
Yeah.
glean some of those efforts. Same thing we do with real estate, right? It's like,
Yeah.
hey, find somebody that knows more than you
Hmm.
and extract as much information as possible out of
Hmm.
them.
Hmm.
So, but on that hunt, they said, hey, what's your dietary restrictions? I said, okay, I only eat meat, I only eat fruit. But I'd be happy to feed myself, go to the store and do that if it's inconvenient, because I understand that it's weird. They said, "Oh no, you're totally good. We understand, and we will totally make that happen." And what's funny is just how people don't understand how sometimes strictness actually means strictness, because it's like the meals, which were wonderful, were anything but meat and fruit. It was like peppers and flour tortillas and like everything. And it's like, well, you eat this, right? It's like, well, no, I mean, no,
No, I
because
mean, yeah.
it's
Mhm.
not, because it's not, it doesn't fall within what I'd love to.
Yeah.
So, so it's just one of those funny things. So just understanding that you got, when you're on these crazy diets or whatever lifestyle eating, that you sometimes have to make and take a special care of feeding yourself, because
Sure.
otherwise you'll either be forced to cheat or you'll starve.
Yeah, sure. Well,
So
what would you say to someone? Okay, so either they just moved to Del Norte and they want to get into hunting, or they already live here and they've been thinking about getting into hunting. Where would you guide someone, or how would you say this is really how you should go about this?
well, what I would do, and what I wish I would have done early on, is just, well, first of all, figure out what somebody's priority is. Are they okay with failure? Like that's a big thing. It's like, it's kind of like when we talk to people about getting into real estate. Like, how resilient are you to not being successful for a little while until you
Sure.
are? Because if some people can't handle that, like that immediate gratification of having success, hunting's tough. It's super tough, because I'm still, I mean, I'm 6 years into this, and I would say I'm definitely, there's people that are way more hardcore than me about it, but I'm very serious about it. And it's still hard to be successful because I'm still learning so much about animal behavior and where to find them and when to do it, and when the moment of truth comes, actually capitalizing and being good enough to actually take an animal with a bow or with a rifle. So what I would say is, it's determining what kind of animal you think might get you excited. Most people love the idea, like this primal idea of just getting out and hunting something. At least men do. I haven't met as many gals that love the idea, but I do know gals that do love to
Sure.
do it. And that's, I think it's amazing for everybody. It's something that everybody can do. But what I would say is, if you're in Crescent City and you want to kill something, you can be really simple and start off getting a rifle, getting your hunting license, and go doing some truck hunting, and go over. I'd be happy to point out to anybody some really accessible areas where you can go drive around, cover a lot of country, and look for some deer to hunt. That's a really low impact way to see if it's something that you might be interested in. Now, I don't think that has anything to do with actual hunting. Like, to me, that is, again, for a lot of people, that's how they hunt, and nothing to disrespect them. But to me, that does not scratch the hunting itch in any way, shape, or form. But that's how I started. That's how I
Yeah.
started. I was like, I'm not going to go just like so deep, make the investments in the gear and all the stuff that comes along with it, and then just to find out that I'm not into this. So I'd say, try to dip your toe in the cultural waters of hunting, and see if it's something that you like kind of the idea about.
Yeah.
And then I would say start by doing some local hunting that's not going to have a serious financial impact. And then
Yeah,
if you
that's
like the,
one thing that Del Norte has that is not the norm, is that we are surrounded by Forest Service roads.
yeah,
And some places that have a lot of wilderness around them, maybe don't have so much access there. So, but we have a lot of access just within, I mean, you can get on a Forest Service road, 15 minutes from, 20 minutes from the beach, 15 minutes from the beach, and you're hunting. So
Absolutely.
definitely take advantage of it. And if you're in Hiuchi Gasky area, then it's even, less than that. So that's cool. Um, you talked to me about, and I thought this was cool about elk. You mentioned something about how elk are curious as
Yeah.
opposed to like what blacktail, which they are more afraid,
Skitterish.
skitterish. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of
Yeah.
speak on that a little bit because I thought that was really interesting.
Well, yeah. I mean, elk are really interesting creatures, and not all elk are the same. And
Sure.
like, there's like funny things within elk world and all animal world. But like, generally speaking, you'll find that young bulls and cows, cows being female elk, are a lot of times very curious, and they might find themselves getting dead because they're so curious. I've killed bulls in previous years that are just way too curious for their own good, and you'll find them. You might even make a noise that maybe you weren't intending to make. Maybe you break something, maybe you step on a large branch, or and they just find themselves wandering in and wondering what the heck is making these new noises that they're not used to. You don't typically find big animals doing that, and that's
Sure.
because they're good at surviving, and they understand that typically those things mean something is not normal. And so, smart elk, who are typically the ones that you want to kill, are typically not as curious, but young elk, so like, and very often totally wonderful animals to harvest, young bulls, 2 3 years old, they're very curious, and they'll come into what somebody might consider what's called a setup, or like you're sitting there waiting to see if something comes along, and you make some noises, maybe make some elk calls, and they'll wander in. It's very interesting. Bears are very
And you can
similar.
actually call them in, right? So there's an elk call, there's a tool, right, that you use, and you can actually bring them in, or that's the idea.
Yeah, during certain times of the year. So elk are one of those animals that breed once a year. Poor bastards. And they so that's we call that the rut, basically. And that's in September for most elk. And on both sides of September, so a little early September and then after September into October, you'll find that you can call to elk, and they're kind of the way that elk talk is through what we call bugling and cow calls. And so it's a very interesting sound, and it's totally repeatable by humans. We have what's mouth reeds, like little, it's just a reed. I don't know what else to
Mm-hmm.
call it, but
Sure.
basically it's like a little rubber thing that goes in your mouth, and you can blow through this tube. It looks like a wiffle ball bat, basically. And it just kind of simulates the sounds that bulls make, and they're calling out to other bulls that they are in the area. They want to fight. They want to look for females to breed. And so as a result, young bulls, who are more dumb than anything, will very often just kind of wander in, not necessarily looking for trouble, but they just wander in looking to see who's the new guy in town, sort of a thing. And so, in recent in recent years, those are often animals that I'll shoot,
Sure.
because again, as still a very new hunter, I am really excited about just being successful. And so that doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, every year my standards and what I'm looking for kind of goes up in regards to, well, I've done this, now I want to do that. I've killed this age class of an animal. I'd like to kill a little bit of an older one. One of the really ironic and interesting things about hunting is that the younger the animal, typically the better they are to eat.
Sure.
But the less meat there is often.
Mm-hmm.
But the older the animal, very oftentimes, the bigger the horns. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a really weird connotation out there that shooting an animal because it's a trophy is like a gross, weird thing. But I think it's really not. I think really ultimately it's actually having the most respect and the most um, understanding for which animals to harvest. And ultimately, if you think about it on a evolutionary standpoint here, if you are always eliminating the younger, smaller age class animals, and you're leaving the old animals who've already been breeding for a significant period of time, they're going to eventually die off from age or from disease or from starvation because they're old, and no animal in the wilderness dies, a peaceful death in their sleep. They either starve to death, get diseased, or get eaten. And so that's typically what happens with old animals. And so when you go and harvest the old animals who've already bred, who've already spread their genes, and you allow the younger animals to continue to come up and grow and continue to breed and spread their genes and propagate, that's really the healthiest environment for animal growth and management.
Hmm.
So
Cool.
shooting the old bulls is the way to go, and the best part is they have bigger horns, so that's why that's why it's more fun too.
That's
So yeah, and so
okay, well,
yeah,
let's just talk real quickly, just because we haven't said it now. I just moved to Del Norte and I see elk everywhere. Kevin, what's the deal? Can we shoot these elk? What's going on here?
yeah. So I wish is the answer.
Yeah,
So we live in California, and again, like I said earlier, like buying California tags is like almost a joke, but I do it. And again, I would start everybody new on this, say, hey, you should still buy tags, and you want to do them before the draw because you want to build points. And well, I'll get to what that means. But to
yeah.
answer your question, no, you can't shoot the elk in California because they are practically I mean, they're like a protected species here.
Yeah,
Now, some
they're like
people
in a
get to kill.
museum. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Some people do get to kill them. And what's amazing is the elk we have here are actually some of the biggest elk in the world.
wow.
And so it's an amazing, we're spoiled rotten because we see all these animals. We can go out to the dairy and see some world-class animals, like literally like some of the biggest elk in the world are out at the dairy,
Wow.
Alexander Dairy. And then you go out and we drive 23 hours to New Mexico to go shoot elk, and they're like half the size and their horns are half the size. And you're like, man, you almost feel like you're let down, but just understanding to manage expectations. We
Yeah,
live in a reality where they're not harvested here hardly
yeah,
at all. And so they grow to be these behemoths of animals. And there are a few fortunate people every year that do get to hunt them. And it's, for most people here locally, it's a very high likelihood of success because the animals are not used to being hunted. And
sure.
so
It's
when
truly a
animals,
harvest, right? It's a harvest
yeah,
season.
it's a harvest.
Yeah,
It's a harvest. And there's nothing wrong with it because if I
yeah,
got it, I would go do it too because they're a beautiful animal.
for
And
sure.
they're 1,200-pound elk. They're
Wow,
humongous.
wow.
And so, but the way that you draw those, the way that you get those tags is essentially by putting in your time. So typically most people after 20 years of buying tags in California will get to shoot one of those elk. So seems like a long time.
That's
I'm
quite
already
the
six.
value proposition.
I'm already 6 years into it. So I mean,
Hey,
I'm
you
like,
might as well keep it rolling, right? At this point.
well, and there's always a lucky one or two people. Like one of my good buddies, the first year he put in for it, he got it. And there's always they give one or two random tags out every year. So there's always a hope out there that you can do something. Um,
And your
and
odds are
then
ever increasing, right? They compound.
yeah,
Yeah,
every year they go up.
yeah,
And then I will say, there are local people here who shoot big deer in our area every year.
yeah.
Every year. And that is a serious grind. And my goal for this year is to get interested in deer hunting a little more. I love deer hunting. I just I haven't given it the attention because I've been so focused on elk. But deer are amazing creatures and they are they're hard to hunt. They're
Yep.
super squirrely animals, blacktail especially, very elusive creatures. And when you see people, like there's a few people here locally that um, kill big blacktail every year, and it is impressive because I mean most people have never actually seen a big blacktail in real life because they're so elusive. And
Mhm.
these big animals are just so good at surviving. When you see the same 5 or 6 people here locally killing these just Boone and Crockett type animals every year, they're doing something special. It's definitely impressive. So I definitely am not there yet, and I love seeing the animals because they're hard to kill. Definitely
Cool.
hard to kill.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for sharing with me your elk stories and talking about hunting.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. I love talking about it.
yeah, it's exciting. It's fun. It's a neat thing. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, we are down here at 1225 Marshall Street, so you can always come by the office and see me, or you can always reach out to me at the office phone number. That's 707-460-6220. My cell phone is 218-1810, and we're on all the social media platforms. So if you want to hit us on Instagram or on Facebook, reach out to us. I'm always trying to update people on what I'm doing. Sometimes that's business, sometimes that's pleasure. So it's, we're blessed here in Crescent City to be able to recreate in the way that we do and be able to be self-employed business people that can be successful here. It's truly a blessing. So I'm just, yeah, just tickled pink. So
it's a neat place to live, and yeah, I absolutely love Del Norte. And if anyone wants to talk more about hunting, call Kevin. You want to talk about buy
hit
or
me up.
selling a home, call Kevin. So thanks,
Absolutely.
man. I
Appreciate it,
appreciate
buddy.
talking to me.
Hey, see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
Hold on.